I think a good example of the universal data license would be for maybe like music creators or content creators who
Absolutely.
who put out content on the web and want to attach a license on it that says this is what you are allowed to do with this data. There's a one-time payment fee to use it for commercial use or things like that. Um, so yeah, the universal data license has been a massive, massive part of the Bazaar marketplace that allows you to trade atomic assets, and Alex has been a big part in kind of having assets that are able to have sponsorship traded around.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the What Kind of Internet Do You Want podcast. I'm Amy James, and today we are lucky to have with us Nick Juliano, one of the founders of Alex Archive. Hey Nick, so glad you could be here with us today.
Hey, Amy, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, I'm super excited to talk with you. We worked on archiving information into a blockchain 10 years ago now, so I've really been looking forward to this chat. But before we get into your project, could you just give our audience a little overview of who you are and why you work in Web3?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I got into software development not too long ago, say maybe 4 or 5 years, and it is what I went to school to study. And out of college, I joined my family company, actually, a software development firm working in the e-commerce industry. And I started to get curious about Web3 in general over the years, and as it became more and more popular, and I kind of started to look for different opportunities in how I can, start to work in Web3 and learn about the development process and decentralization as a whole. And I was actually part of a Discord community run by a couple buddies of mine in the Solana ecosystem who have this ecosystem almost that is essentially like a networking platform, so to speak. And I was fortunate enough to network with someone who offered me an opportunity to start to build in the Arweave ecosystem. And I thought, oh wow, that's a great opportunity. I've been curious about this. I'm excited to see what it could bring. So I took the opportunity. I was super fortunate. And what the project turned out to be was actually the Alex Archive. And shortly in, I started to build it, and I just quickly fell in love with the technology and the concept of decentralization. And that's kind of how I got here. And ever since I started building, I really haven't looked back.
Awesome. Well, the Web3 space is better for it. So I'm curious, since you are sort of relatively new to the Web3 space, were you familiar with other file storage protocols, some of the older ones, IPFS, SIA, Storj? Because Arweave is kind of newer to the scene, or was Arweave kind of your entry point into it?
So Arweave was definitely my entry point. I had heard of other protocols and looked at them at a high level and thought at all the protocols, I was like, oh, that's super interesting. And but yeah, Arweave being the first was definitely like my foot in the door in terms of like development on Web3 and learning about like the space as a whole. I think starting with Arweave was definitely my foot in the door.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, using Arweave for the use case that you're using for definitely makes sense because it is distinct from the others in that it has inherent permanence or persistence as one of the qualities of the data storage that it does. It's kind of like the main thing that is it's differentiating between it and other storage protocols. So, that makes sense for something like the Alex Archive. The Alex Archive, I assume, gets its name from the ancient library of Alexandria. That is what we had originally called our specification back in the day. We called it the Decentralized Library of Alexandria. So tell us more about it. Explain it at a high level. How would you explain your project to a non technical person?
Sure, absolutely. So, Arweave as a whole is was built to kind of prevent the possibility of, book burning on the internet essentially. It's a data preservation network meant to archive information indefinitely. And Alex is kind of conceived as, a way to show that through an interface and platform that people can interact with. So Alex at a high level is an archival platform built on top of Arweave. And what it kind of addresses is the issue that it sort of addresses is in current archiving platforms, the archivists who are entering information and storing that information are the people that also have to maintain that information, right? They have to pay for it. They have to, upkeep on the website and things like that. What we wanted to do with Alex is offer anyone the ability to create their own archives that can be stored in perpetuity. So anyone has the ability to go through Alex right now and create their own pool of information. We refer to collections of information as pools, which are essentially topics or ideas about a current event or an idea that someone finds interesting. Um, and they are able to create pools and receive contributions from sponsors who find that pool interesting, and those contributions are used to pay for the storage of data or artifacts, as we refer to them, on the Arweave network. So, for example, if I started a pool on one popular pool on the Alex Archive is called the Zero COVID pool. It was started, during that time of conflict that we felt was an important topic to start archiving. So we started that pool as a team and reached out to the community to try and receive contributions in the form of AR tokens, Arweave's native currency. And we were fortunate enough to receive contributions, and we started archiving information and storing it on Arweave, so for people to view, interact with, and things like that.
Okay, interesting. So when So let's say that I think that I want to archive something. Is where is the information that I'm archiving coming from? Is it coming from Twitter specifically? Is it coming from across the web? Do I identify that? Do you identify that? How does that part work?
It's a great question. So what we do as a team within Alex is identify any source on Web2 essentially where we could archive information from. Twitter is a great example. Twitter has been a big source so far. Another example of a source is Wikipedia, Reddit, and also people's own personal archives. If you have files that you feel are important, you want to archive, you are more than welcome to upload them. However, the bulk of information comes from sources that we try to identify and kind of build out into our system that allows archivists to use. So, for example, we put time into creating like a Twitter archiver. We put time into creating a Wikipedia archiver, Reddit, etc. And then as we roll those archivers out, we refer to them as miners, like those mining sources out. Anyone who has a pool can go in and pretty much choose which source to pull from in that current session and what to store on Arweave. And we're always actively looking for new sources, new sources of information to pull through, and we're always hoping that the community will reach out to us and say, "Hey, this would be a great source. Would your team maybe look into this?" And we would always be happy to do so. So that's kind of been an ongoing, I get not challenge, but goal of ours is to continually find pretty much any sorts of information that we can efficiently pull into our weave.
Okay, interesting. So your team is sort of configuring a set of options, and then a pool operator is selecting from that set of options where they want to archive from. And are they also selecting the amount of granularity that they might be pulling from that source? And how does that action happen?
100%. You just explained it perfectly. And
Okay.
so to go off your second question, say you are archiving your pool and you want to pull information from Twitter. You can then essentially go into our program, choose that you want to archive from Twitter, and then you can specify at a more granular level what information from Twitter you want to pull from. There's a more generalized like keyword approach where you say, okay, I want to enter a Twitter stream, which is essentially I want to listen for tweets as they come in, but I want to pull tweets that have specific keywords that pertain to my pool. And if tweets are found, they will be archived in and then become artifacts of a certain pool. If there is a specific account that is tied to that pool, you can enter that account and archive that full account. And then the same goes for user accounts and things like that. And the same goes for the other platforms. Twitter is a good example, but same goes for like Reddit. If there's a subreddit that you find is pertinent to your pool, you can enter that subreddit and pull it and so on.
Okay, excellent. What's so important about the work that you're doing is that you're creating a unalterable record of the content on the web. And I think that most people don't realize how ephemeral the web is. Most web content, studies have shown, is on the web somewhere between 6 months and 2 years, which means that a lot of the things that we see are either gone after not very long or have been altered in some way, and you can't see the previous version because it's been erased from a server.
Mhm.
And so one way for those of us, who aren't super into Web3 to think about what you're doing at Alex is kind of like the Wayback Machine, right? The Wayback Machine, the Internet Archive's Wayback Machine is intended to, they have a different way of going about it. They don't have people that are setting the information that's archived. They have scrapers. And so they're just going around taking snapshots of websites and then keeping them all on their servers. So it's also centralized in that way. And because it's centralized in that way, they have gone and taken steps to retroactively then erase certain websites from the stuff that they are preserving because they disagree with it. And that's absolutely their prerogative because they are the centralized hosts of that information. But it's a deficit to, you know, the web as a whole in terms of all of us having a honest record of what was there to look back on. So let's get into some of the. Would you agree with the Wayback Machine analogy before I just blow past that?
Yeah, I was gonna say that is such a great analogy. Looking at the Wayback Machine, it's something we looked at, prior to starting, and we still check it out from time to time. It was a huge like influence into seeing a centralized version of an archiving source, and it kind of goes back to how I was stating earlier, like the current issues with archiving go right into that. Like if you have a centralized entity that is in control of all of that information, they're paying for it, they're storing it, they're doing all the work, so that also means they can decide when and what comes like down and
Hmm.
prevent you from viewing it. We wanted to build Alex in such a way that uh makes that impossible, essentially. So you are in control of your own pool, you decide what goes up, and then because of Arweave's amazing technology, once it's there, it's tamper proof and fault tolerant, and the data is permanent, which we found to be a huge inspiration and really drove us to build the product as we have so far.
Yeah, yeah. And I want to just say like the Internet Archive hosted the first decentralized web summit in 2016. It was called DWeb Locking the Web Open, and they have definitely been. Brewster Kahle is, one of the architects of building the web alongside other people like Sir Tim Berners-Lee and Christopher Allen and all of these people who built those kind of core infrastructure that we rely on for the web today. And at the same time, they have chosen to delete websites from the Wayback Machine. So there's like this interesting tension in that organization between a free and open web and a curated catalog that they are willing to host. And I think that that is something that the decentralized Web3 offers to people, right? That you can have this entire comprehensive catalog of information that is free and open. And you can also filter that information to have a specific set of it that you want to publicize in some way or advocate for or filter according to whatever preferences you have. And so what's unique about the decentralized web3 is that you can have a version, you can have public space and you can have private space. And right now, the web that we have, Web 2, is just entirely private space, even though, we want it to be this free and open space. And so I just think that's really important. And that the Alex Archive is like this excellent example of, showing us how that will work in the future. So um, let's get into some more of the technical details about the Alex archive that the nerds will appreciate. First of all, do you have a token that's unique to your project, or do you just use the AR token?
So the AR token is used for the storage cost of data pulled through Alex and stored on Arweave. We as a platform do not offer a native token. Um, However, so apologies. Let me back up here. Every piece of information that's stored on Arweave, every artifact that is stored on Arweave is itself a token in its own way. We, on other chains would refer to them as NFTs. The term used on Arweave, because of its nature and how they're a little bit different, are referred to as atomic assets. So, for example, if I go in and pull a tweet that is stored as an artifact, that artifact is minted as an atomic asset and stored on Arweave, and is itself a token that can, if the pool operator allows, can be exchanged for another form of currency on Arweave, known as U. But I won't deep dive into that unless we possibly get into it. However, I hope that's a good way of explaining it. Every asset itself is a token that is stored on the platform, and every contributor to a pool becomes the holder of that token as it is mined into a pool. So if I contribute one AR token to a pool, then I am responsible for receiving one AR's worth of artifacts that are mined through that pool. So if, say, there's 100 artifacts mined into a pool, and I contributed 100% of the funds that are used for that storage, I receive 100 tokens, or 100 um, atomic assets or artifacts back into my wallet, and I am now the sponsor of that data. I essentially have my name next to that data, saying I contributed to help have this information preserved on Arweave. However, in the sense of like our own native token used for exchange of, or swapping of other tokens, no, we do not uh, have that. But the assets themselves are tokens. So I guess I hope that was a good way of explaining it. But yes.
Okay, great. That's a really interesting way to approach it. So, just to make sure that I understand what you're saying, let's say I am archiving all of my own personal tweets, that I set up an archive to collect all of my own personal tweets because I want to make sure that they don't get taken down or whatever. Then in my archive is every individual tweet a separate atomic asset or a separate NFT?
Exactly. Yes.
Interesting. Okay, so because on your website it says anyone can start their own pool on any topic or idea they choose and earn AR for archiving. As the pool operator, you can control what artifacts are mined and how much you earn. And I was confused as to how that works, uh, especially when it comes to, let's say I'm archiving someone else's tweets. It's not my intellectual property. So, how do you deal with the sort of rights management there, or what might be earned from these atomic assets, or how does earning from the atomic assets happen?
So, in terms of that's a great question. In terms of earning, what we mean by a pool operator can earn AR for archiving, what that is referring to is, if you are starting an archival pool, you can set the terms in throughout the process of the percentage of contributions that you essentially keep in your own personal wallet as a management fee.
Aha.
So
Okay. Gotcha.
So if I say, I'm going to start an archival pool, and I believe I'm going to be doing, many hours of work, and I think I deserve to keep 5% of all contributions to myself as a management fee. That is completely, we don't determine that. We leave that to the pool operator, to what they think is fair, to keep it decentralized in such a way that, if,
That's smart.
so if,
It's smart. Yeah, the protocols that bake in the percentages, I think, aren't fully thinking through what these things look like at scale, right? Because if it's all open source, why wouldn't somebody just copy pasta and just take out that that
right,
that force percentage, right? Yeah,
right, right.
it should be a marketplace, and that's smart for you guys.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. And we've another thing we try to highlight is, if when you go to contribute to a pool, it states very clearly whether the pool operator decided to take a management fee and how much that management fee is. So we're trying to be transparent in a way that, so if you see a pool operator is going to keep 5% of your AR, that it's there for you to see, and there's really no hidden doors or anything like that.
But those management fees are understandable and appropriate, because the other thing that a lot of people don't understand is that software is sort of alive, in that it needs constant management of some kind in order to continue to work properly. And so, you know, like for example, everybody says like, oh, Bitcoin is just this thing that's just out there and there is no one controlling it. And it's like, that's mostly true, except that if the Bitcoin core devs weren't constantly working on it, it wouldn't be working anymore. And so there is some management that's necessary ongoingly. So it's important to have an incentive for those folks. But is there anything that I can do then? So I have all of these now atomic assets, as you say, or NFTs in the like kind of larger Web3 space is would be the other way to refer to them. Do I have ownership over them in some sort of way that I can monetize them? Or how do you deal with the IP issue?
So the topic of IP, it kind of varies from platform to platform. How we archive information is through each platform's API, and each API or each company states what you are essentially allowed to do with that information um, when it is archived, or
Okay.
essentially what you can do when you pull it from the API and what can happen next. So, what we do with atomic assets in Alex is associate holders of those tokens as sponsors. So, we're not saying that you are the owner of that content. Like, you didn't necessarily put that tweet out yourself. You didn't write that post. You didn't write that Wikipedia page. You did, however, help to contribute onto Arweave. So your name is, associated to it in such a way that you are now a sponsor of it. And in terms of monetization, something that has recently come out within Arweave is another project that actually our team worked on, known as the Bazaar, that allows you to trade atomic assets. I'm happy to dive into that if there's time. However, so you can essentially trade the sponsorship of that information, but we're not stating that you own that information yourself.
Okay, that's super interesting. I like that approach a lot. Does um that bazaar that you're speaking of, is that using the Arweave's universal data license as part of the framework for making that happen?
Absolutely, yeah. The universal data license is a really big part of it's pretty much all atomic assets now stored on Arweave, and the the reason for building the bazaar, a massive motivation behind it, was to kind of highlight the concept of data composability on Arweave. Data composability refers to the underlying nature of Arweave in that all the data stored on it can be shared among all of its applications. So to highlight that, we built Alex. We built this archiving tool, and then we built a way to a core team, a large team of our we have developers. I shouldn't just say we, but a team of developers built the bazaar to allow you to trade atomic assets on that, which can be Alex artifacts or any other type of atomic asset stored among any other application on Arweave. And any of those assets that are created can have a universal data license attached to it, which gives the user of or the holder of the token real world rights um, on that asset. So if I think a good example of the universal data license would be for maybe like music creators or content creators who
Absolutely.
who put out content on the web and want to attach a license on it that says this is what you are allowed to do with this data. There's a one-time payment fee to use it for commercial use or things like that. Um, so yeah, the universal data license has been a massive, massive part of the Bazaar marketplace that allows you to trade atomic assets, and Alex has been a big part in kind of having assets that are able to have sponsorship traded around.
Okay, got it. So if one person sponsors the capture of a tweet that turns out to be historic in some way, could they then use the bazaar to sell that atomic asset to someone else?
So they could, or this kind of goes into this is almost the decision of the pool operator at the time of archiving that tweet. So another thing we leave up to pool operators is the ability to allow trading or not trading of atomic assets. And this kind of
Okay.
goes into the fact that a lot of information that comes through Alex is, more or less heavy and intense information. For example, we recently started. pool around the Israel-Palestine conflict, and we felt as a team, that is sensitive information. To be able to trade around a type of asset like that would be, not necessarily good taste. That should be, it's important to archive, not to trade around. Um, another
Makes
type
sense.
of another type of example would be, trying to think of a pool off the top of my head, but I think there's one around wildlife. And there are really awesome atomic assets around wildlife that have um, assets within that pool that are tradable. So you can go in as, say, if you were the original contributor to that pool and you became the sponsor of that artifact, you can then elect to list that artifact for sale, list the sponsorship of that artifact for sale through the bazaar that someone could come in and buy, who would then be marked as the sponsor to that artifact, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. Okay, let's see. I have two more questions that I want to get into here. So we'll go. Hmm. We'll go with kind of a follow up on this one. So let's say I have the way that it looks right now on your website is when you go into one of these pools, you have sort of thumbnails for each pool title, right? And then you can click on them, and it takes you to a list of all of the items that have been archived. Would you say that's an accurate way to describe what it looks like right now?
Yes, 100%.
Okay. So the struggle for somebody like me going to browse that archive is to have some sort of high level takeaway of what is predominantly included in the archive, what most people are saying, if there's any sort of keywords, that kind of thing. When we were working on this 10 years ago, one of the ways that we approached showing something like Twitter, so interestingly, at the time that we were scraping Twitter and archiving certain topics, Kiev, Ukraine were very hot topics at the time then as well. This was like 2014, 2015.
Gotcha.
And so what we would do is we would take all of the information and then put it into these word clouds so that you could see certain word, and then you could select a period of time where you would say like, okay, start time, end time. And then this word cloud would have words grow and shrink as as the time period played out so that you could kind of get a sense of the collective conversation happening about um, the things that were happening in Ukraine, the weapons that were being used, the solutions that were being offered, the people that were involved, and then you could kind of click into that word and then see more of the archived tweets in there to kind of get more information. Have you guys thought about different ways to display the information to help to get kind of a more high level view, or kind of like more understanding of what's actually in the archive than just this sort of list that you really have to go into each one to see the takeaways?
Yeah, absolutely. And first off, I think that is a super cool idea. However, what we have worked on from the beginning is building out the ability to actually view each artifact in its original form, and that process was a little bit more easier said than done. There is a
Always is, right?
right, right. So there's a this concept on Arweave known as, I don't know if it's a concept, more of or a piece of technology known as a renderer. So a renderer is a piece of code essentially stored on Arweave that says, if you feed me this type of information, render it in a browser in this way. So
Hmm.
what we did to be able to render tweets or Reddit posts or Wikipedia pages in their original form is build and deploy these renderers that essentially take data that is in the form of a tweet, a Wikipedia page, etc., and feed it to that, and then render it through Alex so that you can see it in its original form. So that is how we were able to get to the point of, if you go into a pool page and go down to its artifacts, you can click in, or you can click on the side menu and preview it in kind of a smaller window. Um, that is what allowed us to showcase the information that is stored. And another cool thing about renders and data composability is that because it is stored on Arweave and because the data is composable and can be rendered through any application, if say a tweet within Alex is rendered through the Bazaar, the other application, or another application, it will render in that same exact format. So renderers are essentially mini applications that allow you to pass information and render them the same way within any application on Arweave. And we found that was a great way to kind of show that, oh, if I see this post in this way, I know it's an Alex artifact. I know it was mined through there. However, back to your point about the word cloud and kind of a more high level approach to improving discoverability. Some things we have been working on are, basic UI features such as, discoverability filters based on kind of artifact source. So you can go into your table, you will be able to go into your table and say, show me only tweets, show me only posts from this platform, and it's essentially a small search engine to be able to search through by keyword and things like that. I think a more high level visual, like you mentioned, like a word cloud, would be a really awesome feature to integrate, and kind of have maybe on the pool page itself rather than each artifact to show like this is what's deeper. If you want to go take a look, this is what you'll be finding. I think that would be super super cool.
Yeah, well, you guys are welcome to steal that idea, run with it. We'll even help if you want to talk about it back channel with us because we would love to see it happen. And I think that it's kind of one of the missing pieces for you guys in terms of right now, your site appears to be really focused on the people who are actually doing the archiving. And obviously, you need those people in order to capture the content. But at some point, you need to be appealing to people who are just interested in looking at the archived content, right? And really interacting with it and finding it useful because that's going to be a much larger group of people than those archivers, I assume. Um,
Absolutely.
but on the note of the archivers, so I heard that, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, that Twitter changed the terms of their APIs, the kind of tiers of their APIs, in terms of how many tweets you can get before you have to pay a certain amount of money. They took out the tier that you guys had been relying on. And so now it's very expensive for you to archive from Twitter. Is that still the case or has that been fixed?
It is the case, and it is essentially nothing but unfortunate. We had built out this Twitter archiver, and essentially the time that we felt we were done, they decided to make the API crazy expensive. So the free tier, you are now no longer able to pull tweets from a stream or things like that. You can pay some crazy API key cost to continue to do that. However, it just put us in an unfortunate spot where we essentially lost that source. So I'm using Twitter because up to this point, it has been the biggest volume of artifacts. However, that happened, and you know, because we are constantly looking for news sources, our response was more or less like, oh, well, that sucks. Let's move on. Um, so we started focusing. We're putting more energy into Reddit, which we feel is a great source because there's a lot of debates. And I personally have always been a Reddit fan. I think the content that can come through can be controversial, but you can learn things along the way. Another great example we're actively looking into and building is just called News API, um, which returns, from what I've gathered so far, it will return you a massive list of relevant news articles and the content actually within them. So there's really no like web scraping to be going on, which is, I think, going to be super nice. It'll be a pure API call and return of content, which we think is great. And I've looked through the content itself and it looks really relevant and really high volume. So I'm super excited about that. However, yes, in regards to Twitter, more an unfortunate course of events, but that's kind of the one thing that we've tried to account for in the beginning. So in the sense that like we have a core Alex framework that archives information onto Arweave, and a site that is completely decentralized deployed on Arweave and can't be tampered with by anyone. And then we built a separate archiving tool that is using a whole bunch of different Web2 platforms that, to be frank, like are going, could go down, are controlled by centralized entities, and could start to cost a lot of money, like Twitter
Mhm.
did, and which kind of showed that we need to build this in such a way that it's kind of plug and play almost. Like, so if one source goes down, be ready to build another one.
That makes sense. And I just want to use this to highlight that there was a lot of celebration when Elon Musk purchased Twitter, now X, because he was claiming that it would be the home of free speech, that people would be able to say what they want without fear of being deplatformed, demonetized, deboosted, all of these kinds of things. And yet there are still plenty of people who haven't had their accounts reinstated. And as you have now experienced, the mechanics of the business have shifted in a way that makes it not possible for you to scrape the tweets anymore. And it really just highlights, regardless of what you think of Elon Musk, regardless of what you think about the positive or negative changes to the platform, that well, my grandpa had this saying that he often said, which was, "You take the king's coin, you sing the king's tune," right? That Elon Musk is that any centralized platform, whether it's the Internet Archive's Wayback Machine or now Elon Musk's X, when it is centrally controlled, they have decision making power over what happens. And so, why that's important to understand is that the solution to the problems that the web faces right now isn't to have someone in charge that you like. It is to move the infrastructure to a decentralized protocol that is controlled, that the power is held by the ends of the network, that's controlled, it's by the people, of the people, for the people, so that so that it's not subject to the whims of who's in charge, but rather has a sort of um, basic framework of let's say rights and responsibilities and um, permissions that allows all of us to participate and not participate in the ways that we choose. So I have a question or a thought I just want to share with you about how to work around this decentralized or this Twitter API issue, which is there any scraping that you can do in a free level? Like, can I scrape or archive that access the API below a certain number, or is it just completely locked down now?
From what I've gathered and redigging into their docs since the prices have changed, is that it's now changed to the free tier API key will allow you to post any sort of tweet. Post meaning you can, actually send tweets
Publish.
out from your account and publish. Yes.
Mhm.
However, the get endpoint, the ability to retrieve anything is, I believe, 0 calls per day, or something so incredibly low that it's like you're gonna go over your limit within seconds. Um,
Okay. Okay. I was gonna say it would be an interesting sort of whack-a-mole kind of hack to set up something where if everyone was allowed 100 calls or something per day, something super low so that you wouldn't be able to use it in a professional way, but that you could use it personally, that you could then set up people who are all calling and then you pool
mm.
all of those calls together. But sounds like that's not workable anymore. That's too bad. So how is the Alex Archive project funded? You don't have a token. So do you just have a company? A lot of the projects that I talk to have a company and have a protocol. Is that kind of the setup that you guys have, or do you have just the company that's building the software?
So our team is funded by Forward Research, a company led by Sam Williams, founder of Arweave, who has now started this company to fund teams to build decentralized applications on top of Arweave. So that is how we are able to. That's how we're funded to build the Alex Archive among different applications that we're working on, and we have been, very fortunate to come into the opportunity. And my our team is, obviously, fell in love with the concept of Arweave and building on top of it, and it's been a really awesome experience so far.
Awesome. And so does the Alex Archive you had kind of talked about it in some sort of protocol way. Is that an aspect of what you're building, or is it more just like you're building a front end?
Our we do have a core protocol in, what we refer to as like an archiving protocol. It's, the ability to take information and transform it into an atomic asset in an efficient way. And
Okay.
that protocol is, you know essentially our back end to be completely tamper proof and, not to be altered with by anyone. That is the ability to essentially a pipeline onto Arweave. The front end,
Cool.
our website, is another aspect that a completely decentralized web application built and stored on Arweave that allows people to access that information that is stored.
Okay. And do you have a business model that you expect for the company?
In our Considering we're still pretty early on, we are at this moment just trying to, gain some traction and kind of get the word out. And, we're kind of driven by the importance of, archiving in general, and being a decentralized platform that people can rely on to archive information and have that be there for them forever. So really, right now, our main priority is to, reach out to people, encourage people to start pools, try and gain contributions to continue current pools, and so on.
Okay. Gotcha. Makes sense. Um, I'm wondering if you are based in the US or if you're based out of the US.
We are in the U.S., out of right around Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, if you're familiar. Um,
Okay. Very nice. Do you have regulatory concerns about the state of Web3 in terms of your project?
Certainly, questions that I always, dig into things and try and find answers. I think the nature of Web3 right now is that there's many regulatory questions that people ask, and I think it's just a matter of learning. I still have a lot to learn in terms of regulatory, cases in Web3. And I'm always actively looking for, when questions do come up, who can I ask, and where can I look for answers to things.
Yeah. I mean, given that you guys don't have a token, I think that you're definitely in a safer spot than a lot of projects are. Um, so when you think about where we are today and where we might be, let's say 5 years from now, what do you think? Paint a picture for us. What is your vision for Web3 and what it looks like when we have hit that mainstream adoption level? What will be different for users? What will be the same?
I think it's a great question, and I think my answer would kind of tie into what I briefly brought up earlier around the concept of data composability. Um, Seeing that, all the applications I build now work together and share data and things like that. From a developer standpoint, people who are building, um, people I work with and me personally have found that when you start to build on data that is composable, that is, shared, there's it completely eliminates the cold start issue of starting a new application. So the rapidness of development is like 10x. So you don't really need to design your own data model that is part of a singular data silo that, you are in control of. There is a network of data already there that you can build on top of. Um, and from a user perspective, seeing the applications that using multiple applications that you can share your data across, I think is just a huge benefit. For example, on Arweave, you can people have the ability to create their own profile, and that is their Arweave profile. It's known as the AR profile. And essentially, on any application you go into now, you log in, you connect your Arweave wallet, and you see your profile among any application. There's no concept of, creating an account per application. And for one example of data composability is going into your account and seeing the artifacts that you have sponsored and seeing them there, and then also going into, any other application and seeing that same data, but maybe it's used in a different way. For example, the bazaar, you can go in and now trade that data. And I think the having data composability as a concept be like a standard for the web, um, on a decentralized network is going to be huge for, in terms of productivity and monetization, really all these benefits that I think people will find when they get into it.
I could not agree more. Composability is became this sort of very hot word in the last couple of years. And I I love that it's an idea that's catching on because it's the solution to a problem that creators in particular have my heart, and they have this huge problem of like, and now that we put out all of this content for the podcast, there's like different, is it portrait, is it landscape, how many minutes can the thing be like, and we also have to then upload to every different platform individually. And the amount of time that takes is extraordinary. It's such a burden when you're just trying to create good content. And it's also a huge burden in terms of trying to monetize that content because the terms of service are different on every platform. And so, how do you use somebody else's content how and collaborate with them and then monetize that in a way that's going to work on one platform, let alone 5 different platforms? And that composability factor, like things like the universal data license are 100% the solution to that problem. Are there standards that you have seen that maybe should be like some of the first steps that we take? Like I know a big one is decentralized ID, and that one has made a lot of progress over the years to come to sort of an agreed upon set of standards that different protocols can all use, that this basic framework for decentralized ID so that there's composability across protocols. Are there others that you've seen or that you're thinking about that we should be thinking about as a community?
So I can really only speak to the Arweave ecosystem, considering that is what I built on top of. However, standards are such an important um, concept in this ecosystem because it allows for data to be shared in a proper way that applications can read and organize it in a proper way. So there are different standards set in place that all atomic assets follow, or different types of smart contracts follow, that applications can then, essentially recognize that this abides by this standard. For example, on Arweave, on any atomic asset, you can attach tags, and tags are arbitrary values that are associated with the data. And so, in order for a piece of data on Arweave to be an atomic asset, it needs to include a title tag, a description tag, and a topics tag. So if an application reads that transaction and sees those tags, it knows it follows a certain standard, and it abides by that, and it can be used in such a way that atomic assets can be used. Um, However, as far as decentralized IDs, I think it's a very cool concept. I can't personally speak to many different protocols and the standards they use. However, at a high level, I think standards are going to be of the utmost importance.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the data models, the schema that Arweave uses are ultimately going to need to be compatible with the ones that IPFS uses, as an example, right? And right now, we don't have that. And that's, I think, something that we're going to need to work toward before we can get to this, vision of Web3 that we all dream of, where there's this just tremendous amount of interoperability. Okay, well, this has been such a fun chat. I'm very stoked about the Alex archive, and I look forward to the good work that you guys will do in the future. Where can people find you guys?
So we can be found on Twitter. We are at the Alex Archive. Our URL is Alex. You can find us on the permaweb on Arweave at alex.arweave.dev. I believe Twitter is the best way to reach us. We have a Discord link. Happy to send it if I can somewhere. I don't know it off the
Sure.
top of my
We
head,
can
but
link it in the show notes for people.
that would be great. Thank you so much. And Amy, thank you so much for having me on. I had a really good time.
Awesome. Well, I have one final question for you. It's the name of the podcast. What kind of internet do you want?
Shooting for a decentralized internet in Web3.
Awesome. Simple, but straightforward. I love it. Thank you so much, Nick. Have a great day.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks, everyone. See you next time.